Good afternoon. I'm sure you're very tired and we'll try to make it exciting. We're privileged to have with us today Mridula Garg, who, as you know, is this very wonderful Indian writer in Hindi. And she's a writer of fiction primarily. She writes novels, short stories, and a lot of plays, and she has been a columnist. She has also written poetry, but primarily known as a poet. We could talk about many things, but first maybe we could start with Mridula, if you could read, because earlier we were talking about how this festival started on the 30th anniversary of the Bhopal gas disaster. So Mridula ji has a good piece on it, and I'd request her to read it, if she could.
Friends, 30 years ago, when the Bhopal gas disaster happened on midnight of 4th December, I had written a story called The Rebel Cloud. I'll read a passage from it because this has just stayed with me over all these years. And since the festival started on the 30th anniversary of this Bhopal gas tragedy, I think it's appropriate to read it. Is my voice reaching?
No.
Hold it closer.
Was it closer?
Okay.
Somebody once told me that, actually my brother, who's a rock singer, said you have to hold it close enough as if you're kissing it, but not actually kissing it.
Yeah. So this story is actually a take on Meghdootam, where the lovesick hero of Kalidas chooses a cloud to take his message to the beloved. I shall not take your message to your beloved. I will not. The cloud was quite adamant. The poet was shocked. Had not the legendary poet Kalidasa chosen a dapple grey cloud as a messenger for his lovesick hero? But here was a little fluff of a cloud refusing to obey him. He who was the incarnation of Kalidasa, born for the 1000th time in the land of Kalidasa himself, and in the very center of India that we now call Madhya Pradesh. Brahmin that he was, he rose in a terrible anger, all set to curse the cloud and those to come after it. But the poet in him restrained him. How could he curse the cloud and his progeny and deny the earth its meager sustenance? The cloud laughed derisively. Have you lost not only your vision, but your sense of smell and hearing? Do you not wonder at the sudden silence that assaults the senses with far greater rapacity than the greatest cacophony of sound? This is not the dance of Lord Shiva that carries in its womb the seeds of fresh creation. This is the end, final and irrevocable. No god dances this dance. It's man himself, an imperfect being who believes himself to be perfect. Nature has not entrusted him with its keep. He has made a plaything of nature, and the third world his playground. It was in Bhopal that nature chose to strike back. Do you not hear even now? Do you not smell the lack of everything? So potent is the poison that the dead do not rot. They just multiply. They just multiply. The cloud stopped in the middle of the sentence, petrified. A sudden darkness descended upon the city. But it's high noon, wondered the poet, and why had the cloud stopped preaching? He went to the window and threw it open. The fleecy cloud rushed in. He felt its touch as it went past him. Outside, it was pitch dark. But a fire raged within his body. As it reached his heart, his mind flamed with the last verse. Give us grace, we shall atone. He strove to give it voice so that the little cloud may record it for history, but he had no voice. He stared at the huge giant of a mushroom cloud that lumbered towards him and lost both vision and sight. The poet died standing, but as he succumbed, he felt the caressing touch of cool water on his face. With a last burst of extinguished hope, he realized that his rebellious cloud had the grace to weep over him before it surrendered to the giant foe. This was just a small part of the story. What I really wanted to say, that a lot of things come to an end, but not karuna or compassion. Everything is constantly being destroyed, but we in India believe that they are also being recreated. And that is the hope that I think everyone, everywhere in the world lives by. And that is the reason I think that we keep writing.
Yeah. That's an excellent reason to write, to give us hope and to keep hope alive. But in your work, Mridulaji, you actually also talk about, you don't really take a very judgmental tone. So your idea of hope is very different from the moralistic construct of this is bad, this is good, and there is hope. Yeah? So it's a much more complex way of looking at life in the future and reality. So is that a conscious choice, or is that just the way that it evolved?
It's the way it evolved. I never sort of consciously made a choice about it. Except even, while writing, I have a very strange creative process. I don't make any notes, I don't keep a journal, I don't keep a diary, I don't take photographs. Even when I am traveling, I don't take notes. It's all stored in here. So when the first sentence comes to me, whether it's a story or a novel, I start writing. So what happens after that, it comes out of the internal logic of the story. So there is never any conscious decision. Of course, there is a conscious decision that I'm going to write. Now what it is going to be, a story, a novel, is quite undecided till I have done a bit of it. Only then, okay, I realize it. Now this is giving birth to further ideas, and it's going to be a novel and not just a story.
Has it always been like that, or did you earlier know that, okay, I'm going to sit down and write a story? You started with short fiction, right?
I started with short fiction, but after I had written only about 5-6 stories, I wrote a play. And at that time, that play was very expensive. It was called Ek Aur Ajnabi.
Right.
Recently, it has been translated in English, but not yet published as Strangers. Fortunately for me, when I started writing, I used to live in a very small kasbah of Karnataka, where there were hardly any Hindi-speaking people, and only 2 Hindi magazines used to come there. So I had done economics I majored in economics, and I taught economics. I had read a lot of Hindi literature, along with English literature and Russian literature and Bangla literature and all that. But I had absolutely no idea about the politics of the literary world. So I just sat in this small kasbah in Karnataka, and I wrote stories and sent them to all the leading magazines. And when they got accepted and published, I thought this is a real utopian world full of generous people, So it was only after I had published a novel called Chitta-Cobra, which was very much acclaimed for the first 3-4 years, and then suddenly somebody woke up to the fact that, you know, it's not a correct
it was
moral
obscene.
novel.
It's got you into deep trouble.
So it got me in all kinds of trouble. So I always say that as long as I did not write well, I even got an award for my first story, an award for my first novel. But as soon as I started writing better, from my standards rather well, all this stopped. So actually, the whole business of people being moral or immoral, or that never struck me actually, you know. That there was such a thing as a code of morality. I really tell you, Andra, I must be abnormal or something. It never struck me. There was a code of morality. I knew things were right if you were not guilty while doing it. If you did not feel guilty while doing those things, they must be right.
To ask if there was any, I mean, if you what you feel about this. Am I right or am I just being?
You're absolutely right. In fact, one Hindi critic once wrote that I would not like to live with any of Mrigala Garg's women. Who wants a woman who's forever doubting, who's forever questioning, who's forever arguing with herself, with you, with everybody? I don't want to live with any such woman. So apparently they are not women. Even with women, you know, in one of my novels, Katgala, the women are subjected to the direst of violence. All kinds of violence, you know, not only rape, beatings, mental violence. A woman writes a book which is stolen by her husband, you know. She does all the work and he says it will be published under both their names. But the book is actually published only under his name. And there is no proof. She has no proof to, you know, establish that she had done the work. All kinds of cruelties and violence. But nobody has ever sympathized. I mean, these women are not weeping and wailing and ranting, and they don't come out as victims. So in fact, one woman writer, quite a famous one, asked me that what is this, you know, these women are nowhere, you can't commiserate with them because they're not asking for sympathy. They all come out as strong women. They are survivors. Basically, my women are survivors. Whether they are elderly women, you know, mothers, or they are wives, or they are daughters, or they are, you know, at any age group. I have written a collection of stories. Somebody asked me to write on feminist discourse. I said, God, I don't write like that. But I'll give you stories which are about women. From a woman in a womb, you know, that my story, Woman is Born, which Andra actually had published in a magazine, to a 70-year-old woman. There will be stories, or even 75-year-old women, about how their women's, I never say man, I say how their mind works. That is another thing, you know. Women are supposed to write from the heart. Men are supposed to write from the mind. Women are supposed to be emotional. Men are supposed to be logical. My women write from the mind or the womb. You know, they're very, very conscious of the fact that they have a womb. And I'm also very concerned. I mean, a lot of my women are talking about motherhood as an empowering thing. And at the same time, they are cerebral women. So to have women both cerebral and sensual is very difficult to take. It's very difficult to take for most people.
Yeah, you have also written about children, and you've written about child labor. Would you, I mean, that's again another area that a lot of people have not touched, because it is a very worrying area, but then one doesn't really know how to grapple with it. And you've written about child labor in a way that could partly also be read as a children's story.
Yeah.
So yeah, could you tell us a bit about that?
This is a play I wrote. It's called Jadoo Ka Qaleen, the magic carpet, and it's about children who work in the carpet factory, and it's, you know, how the children are taken almost parents are paid money during a famine and the children are taken to Mirzapur where they are weaving carpets and they're like bonded labor. And the interesting thing in this play was that these little children who are weaving the carpet, while they're weaving the carpet, they tell stories. Though they are, half fed and all kinds of things are happening. I mean, the gruesome things that I don't have the time to go into. And yet they have retained their wonder, this sense of wonder, and they tell stories. And the story is that this carpet that they are weaving is actually a magic carpet. And once it's done, they'll all sit on it and fly to their respective villages. That's how it goes. And then finally they are rescued by an NGO, but they go back to the village and the same fate awaits them again. Because the village still is in the grip of a drought and the forest has been destroyed. And before these children tell the stories, the grandmother tells stories about how the forest is, how the prince would come, and the children imbibe that. So basically, it's not a grim tale, despite the very grim circumstances. And if you just read the first act, it's a children's play, because it ends on a note of optimism. The children are rescued. If you read both the acts, it's totally an adult play, because the children have to then either go back to the same carpet factories, or the only other option their parents find is to marry the daughters to old men and get money. And with that, try to, start some work there in the village, to start a small industry in the village, or save the fields. I've also, in my novel Kathgula, which I earlier talked about, where all these beatings and violence against women goes on.
There is a child translated as this, right? This is The Country of Goodbye. This is the book. There are some books here, just
the English ones. I brought the English ones to legitimize myself, because the tragedy of the intelligentsia of the Hindi-speaking world, or the Hindi belt, is they do not know their writers. So, if I have books in English, I exist. So anyway, in this book also, there are 4 women narrators. One of them has been a child laborer in a bangle factory, and she hardly speaks. She hardly ever speaks. And when a policeman comes, she goes and hides. That is her psyche. But then as she goes on working, and she looks after the master of the house who's incapacitated, she grows in confidence, to the extent that she's forcibly married to her own brother-in-law. But she comes out of that marriage, she beats up that fellow, and she is a totally independent person, and she's a survivor. She's a survivor. So that's how it goes. So child labor is something that occurs again and again in my work.
Social, it's not that earlier you said that you didn't really think about morality and all of that. But actually I would like to differ on that, because I think you do think about it quite a bit. If you, because, excuse me, I've forgotten the name.
Minjulman. Yeah, that's my latest novel.
Yeah, when you talk about can you just tell us a little bit about it, and then we'll see whether or not you are aware of morality.
Okay. No, morality, what I meant was morality, accept its moral values, accept its system of moral values, that I have never taken into account. I don't mean morality per se, but it's my own sense of morality. The choice is mine, and not the society's about what is mine.
Tell us in a gist.
Minjulman is my latest novel, and I swore for a long time that I will never write an autobiography. I also do not read the autobiographies written by writers, because they've already told all their lies, half-truths in their novels. So now when they sit down to write about themselves, they're
I love these generalizations that you have. I never do this.
I mean, I used to say, and then I found when I started writing this novel, it took me about 6 years. I had already given out the name that I am writing a novel called Miljul Man after the death of my sister, who was called Manjul, and she died in 1998. And in 2000, I said, I'm writing this novel called Miljul Man, which is partly a biography of my sister. It's an anagram, you know. It can also be Mil Manjul. Okay? So, I never realized that if I write about Manjul, by default I'll have to write about myself. Because the story is about two sisters. And it's this relationship which is very, very complex between these two sisters. Now, I have to search for the craft, you know, how to write a novel which was not a novel based on a biography, which was also not a biography. It was frankly a biography and frankly a novel. So that I make no bones about who the character is. It is Manjul Bhagat. Her stories are mentioned, her novels are mentioned, the critic's idea of her is mentioned, but she was a very complex character, you know. She lived her life as if it was somebody else's life. She lived a pretend life. So in Hindi, you know, I would say वो अपनी काया में ऐसे रहती थी जैसे दूसरे की काया में रह रही हो. So basically literature is parkaya pravesh. You become the other, isn't it? My sister lived the other. Her own self was hidden from the entire world. So there was no way I could tell her biography without making it a novel. Without, you know,
I'm just trying to hurry you up because they're asking us to hurry up.
Okay. So this then, I mean, after swearing that I'll never write an autobiography, I was caught in such a web that I wrote part novel, part autobiography, part biography. But how do you connect it with morals?
Because there's this author, there's a writer who's coming to write. Tell the story, just the story, not where you come from. There's a writer who wants to write about
the dead sister, whose name is Gul in the novel.
Gul comes to write about Gul and wants to talk to the sister of Gul about Gul, so that, you know, she can just tell us the story, to reconstruct the story of Gul. And when the sister talks about her dead sister Gul, there are many things that she does not reveal, and then go on, and then finally when. Actually, you tell the story so much better.
The sister tells only half-truths. She hides a lot about her sister, about herself, about her being in love with the same man as her sister is, and about the other characters in the novel. There's a mad mama, mad uncle, who says the most sanest things, you know. He also gives very incisive political comments and all these things, but the younger sister who's alive hides a lot of things, doesn't want to talk about the madness of the mama, doesn't want to talk about the frauds that her father does, and all those things. And also about the sister, she, you know, builds up her own image of the sister and talks about it. And then there's a chapter in which the sister talks, and then the writer fills in the blanks and uncovers all the falsehoods or half-truths. Actually, falsehood is all right. Half-truths are very difficult to deal with. So that's how the novel proceeds. And the last chapter, this is the story of the man. This is the story of it is a fantasy that they are weaving, you know. They're together in fantasy. And in the last chapter, last chapter is entitled Man se utre zami par aaye. That means that you come down from the world of fantasy, and this is the true reality, which is really grim. And the novel is such that you won't stop laughing, you know. You just go on laughing, and then you will pause and think, but why am I laughing? This is so tragic. So there is, it is irony basically.
Yes, irony is a very strong, it's a strong thread in all of your work. But what I was trying to get at is at the end, where the two characters, the sister and the writer who is basically taking notes from the sister, there is an impression that they are maybe the same person.
Yeah. There's a hint that they're actually the same. It is only one person. Both the sister and the writer are only one person. And they're not two people.
So they're not two people. So that is where my question about your being unaware of, or uncaring of morality comes in, because I think you deeply care about morality, which is why this writer, who is also the sister, has this conflict about what to make public,
yes,
what not to make public, how to cater truth to an uncaring, moralistic society. So that's basically my point.
No, that you're very right. I mean, I think you're very, very perceptive, Andra, because, you know, when I wanted to write and I was searching for the craft, the main thing was that since my sister had never revealed anything, how much right do I have to reveal it? So I had to work in a way that it was fiction. Now the strange thing is that most people, despite the fact that her novels are mentioned, her stories are mentioned, so much is mentioned, they read it as fiction. And I say at one point, if you did not understand her by reading her fasana, by reading her work, how can you understand her by my telling you the truth? So, and the novel ends, the last line is, Baki ka fasana phir kabhi. That I'll tell you the rest of the tale later. But that's the most ironical of it all, because there is nothing more to tell.
There's a lovely young lady there who has been asking us to keep quiet now. So maybe can we have 5 minutes of question answers quickly? Yeah? Okay. Anybody have any questions, comments, queries?
Where do you find the inspiration for these women? Who are these women?
I have a family full of absolutely extraordinary, if not abnormal women. I mean, I say in my novel that in my family, half the people are completely mad and all the people are half mad. So I'll give you 2 examples quickly. I had a great grandmother who, when my mother got pregnant, she went to the temple and prayed that it should be a girl child, which is very unusual, and my mother then had 5 daughters. Because 3 of whom became writers. This woman had great, God listened to her all the time. And 3 of the sisters became writers. And I had a grandmother, Nani, who, when she was on her deathbed, she told my Nana that you are no good, you are a sahab, he was a bar at law, and you are going to get my daughter married to some sahab. So please go and fetch your friend who was a freedom fighter, Pyare Lal Sharma, well-known freedom fighter, and he is going to arrange the marriage of my daughter after I am dead. So he was fetched. My Nana went and fetched him, though my Nani used to do parda, She would not talk to strange men. I mean, she hardly ever talked to her husband. So she told him.
Married women have stopped doing.
So she took a promise from Pyare Lal Sharma. And so my mother was married to an impoverished freedom fighter instead of a rich groom that my Nana would have chosen. So, women like that. And my mother never entered the kitchen. She did not like children. She never fondled us. And she had 6 children because my father was very fond of children and my father brought us up. So we had this extraordinary or abnormal or unusual, whatever the word you want to choose. So basically, I'm so used to offbeat women. If I found them totally normal. It's only when the critics started pointing out that they wouldn't like to live with my women that I realized something was wrong with them.
Is there any other question or should we wind up?
One last question. So these offbeat women, do they live with offbeat men?
No.
Regular men.
Some are offbeat. Some are offbeat. I mean, my premise is that if there is a man who can empathize like a woman, then there will be no confrontation. And once there is no confrontation, there will be no more Draculas in the world.
Thank you very much. This is another book that we did not talk about, but this is a book about politics and the idea of India, something that we discuss every morning. Mridula Garg, thank you very much.